In the last few days, a transcript has been leaked that details communications between the OceanGate Titan sub and its parent ship, the Polar Prince. This transcript has not been verified by any representatives of the company, thus it cannot be stated definitively to be accurate. A debate has ensued to determine if in fact it is the actual transcript of text message communications between the two. Former OceanGate executive Rob McCallum and James Cameron each independently made statements that seem to reflect knowledge of the actions of the crew in the time just before the catastrophic event. We will examine the timeline according to the transcript and compare that with known information reported or confirmed by company sources. Stockton Rush was in charge of the submersible, so the communications marked sub are his responses to the ship, noted as top in the message string. I will be reading the messages as they appear on the transcript, but remember that these were in fact text messages and not an audio recording.
Clear for descent. Enjoy the ride.
Descending now. Launch sequence complete. Ready?
All clear.
Proceedings.
Enjoy the dive, gentlemen.
This initial sequence appears to match what has been reported regarding the start time of the descent. OceanGate and its CEO Stockton Rush have stated many times that it should take about 2.5 hours to reach the Titanic wreckage. Thus, the arrival time would be estimated to be around 10:30 a.m. The depth they were planning to reach would be 3,800 meters below the surface. This means they would be traveling at a speed of about 25 meters per minute.
You're 15 minutes into the dive, current depth. Systems check, please.
Systems check complete, all in order. All lights are green. We are 756. Proceeding.
Thank you. Proceed.
During the first update, the depth was reported to be 756 meters. In 20 minutes, this would have been a little deeper than expected, but all seems well. Stockton Rush and Paul Henry Nargeolet were veterans of submersibles. Stockton, as the designer of the Titan, had been down many dozens of times. Paul Henry had 37 visits to the Titanic in a French research institute submersible and was an expert on Titanic history.
30 minutes in, update please.
All systems are functioning normally. We're in good shape, continuing our descent as planned.
Superb. Proceed.
The second check-in seemed pretty standard as well. At this point, everyone must have settled into their positions and gotten adjusted the initial discomfort of close quarters. There were 5 people sitting in an area no bigger than a queen-size mattress. They had to stay seated with a 4-foot ceiling above and curved walls to lean against. With their various levels of experience, each was certainly having different feelings about the dive. The Dawoods, a father and son pair, were probably enjoying the bonding opportunity watching the wonders of the sea passing the front window section of the vessel. Mr. Hamish Harding, aviator and businessman, was all surely have been fascinated by what they were experiencing.
Over 45-minute mark. Current depth, confirmed status.
Depth at 1934, all systems stable and descent continuing as planned. Happy crew?
Excellent.
The next update revealed their position in the descent. After being in the water for 50 minutes, they had reached 1,934 meters. This was deeper than projected in the original plan. The passengers were likely delighted at the sights and discussion about Titanic, the sea life, and what was ahead. So much so that Mr. Rush commented on the air of happiness in the vessel during his descent update.
You're at the hour mark.
All is smooth sailing here.
The next update was standard, and all as expected. This first hour of diving seemed to be following the same pattern as every dive before. Certainly an air of confidence would have prevailed among the team. The nerves and adrenaline would have settled after an hour. Presumably they would have all been engaged in a dynamic discussion of Titanic and the views laid out in front of them.
You're at 75 minutes depth status. Do you need to adjust velocity?
They're all under control. At 2960, no adjustments needed. We're enjoying the ride.
Understood.
The topside status inquiry at 75 minutes indicated that there was a question about the speed that they were descending. The descent rate should have been around 25 meters per minute, but they had been lowering at a velocity of about 40 meters per minute. Stockton replies that he's good with the speed and did not need to adjust. He closed with a reassuring statement that they are enjoying the ride. Unfortunately, that air of joy would soon be crushed with the sound of an alarm.
We're noting M alarm from the RTM. Reducing velocity, descent depth 3433.
The exciting descent to the sea floor would have been abruptly interrupted by a single alarm. For Stockton Rush, it was not the first time he's heard the RTM system alarm. This system, which he designed for real-time monitoring, was established to detect any defects in the integrity of the hull. This system was designed to give advanced warning for any potential future damage. At this point, the vessel was only 350 meters from the wreckage.
Understood. Do you need to ascend?
No change with thrust, the rate of descent is increasing. At 35, going to release the ballast now, stand by.
Because of the warning, Mr. Rush tried to slow the velocity of descent, even using thrusters, but the descent continued. He stated the rate to be 35 meters per minute, but proceeded with releasing the ballast. This meant that the heavy weights attached to the sub for descent would be released. This would help the vessel be more buoyant and fight descent.
Yes, agree. Release the ballast.
No improvement. Preparing to jettison the frame.
Affirmative. Update when able. RTM indicator status?
Frame jettison, multiple attempts needed, but starting the ascent now.
Clearly, the ballast release did not slow the descent rate in the way he expected. His next option was to release the frame in order to lighten the sub. After some effort, it looks like the extra weight was released, and an ascent was beginning. It was 7 minutes from the first alarm to the beginning of the ascent. The passengers would have probably felt dread at the sound of an alarm, but Stockton Rush was an expert with lots of experience. After several tense minutes, an ascent would have seemed like a relief of sorts.
Multiple attempts? What is your status? RTM indicators? Depth? Update please when able.
Cracking sound at aft.
Can you identify source? RTM indicator status?
Negative.
The next few minutes transformed with a sickening sound. When you are sitting at nearly 6,000 psi, a crackling sound would be heart-stopping. Stockton was likely digging deep into his vast experience to solve this problem before they passed the point of no return.
RTM status?
Trying to run diagnostics, ascending now, but very slow. Sounds have subsided. Global RTM alert active, all reds.
The topside was trying to get a grasp on the situation, but was only able to evaluate a couple of words sent every few minutes. It was clearly a paralyzing situation for them. There was nothing they could do, and had very little information to work with. With the RTM system alerting all red lights, the hull was definitely in questionable shape. Mr. Rush was monitoring the ascent speed with concern, because if they could get to a higher depth, they might be able to avoid the catastrophic failure.
Understood. Any codes? Depth? Ascent rate? Updates when able, please.
Slow ascent in progress. Quarter predicted. Unclear why rate is small. No indicator at 3476, aiming for the surface.
We are talking it over with the engineer. Stand by.
Unfortunately, the ascent rate was only a fourth of what was expected. They were still at 3,476 meters, despite having dropped weight and attempted ascent for nearly 15 minutes. It was unclear as to why the vessel was not going up. With a lighter load and thrusters attempting to push them upwards, there was no progress.
Depth and status, please. What's the wattage on upwards thrust?
Reading red on the A power bus. I switched to B at 3457. More sounds aft.
This was the final message from the sub to the topside ship. The company has publicly reported that they lost communications with the sub around 9:45. Despite trying to switch thrusters, there was no movement towards the surface. They were still at nearly 3,500 meters, and now the most ominous sound in an underwater submersible has returned. The crackling sounds were back, again in the aft region. These sounds would have been a clear indication for Stockton that the carbon fiber hull was under great stress and at risk for collapse. Sadly, the passengers would have spent this time completely helpless and aware that they were in a dire situation.
Understood. Continue ascent. Talking to Carlos about power bus situation right now. Stand by. We are activating recovery procedures. Carlos is requesting wattage output from bus B. Status update, please. Velocity of ascent? We're not receiving you. Update, please. Status and depth report. We need you to respond with status and depth. Carlos is requesting wattage update on thrusters. We are unable to read you. We are moving to recovery coordinates. Report if you read. Please respond if you're able.
It was 19 minutes from the initial alarm until communications were lost with the Titan. The final messages made it clear that the RTM system was fully alarming because of hull integrity, and the crackling sounds were an unmistakable indication of layers of carbon fiber moving and bending. At this point, we know that the vessel imploded and all 5 passengers have perished. This communications breakdown gives us a potential glimpse into the manner of failure the Titan experienced and the difficult timeline that the passengers endured.